So what we do is use CPC on this. We do two transects, 24 quadrats each, and that gives us a total of 32 square meters per site, fairly substantial sampling. And the CPC analysis, there's various things you can do with CPC analysis. One thing is you can outline the area of corals and get a total by species and by the total on quadrat, and then summarize those for an entire transect. So you outline each coral using a cursor, and you end up with the area of each coral. And from that, you can just make a simple calculation, determine the diameter, and thereby arriving at the size class diameter data that is the same objective as the conventional DAR NOAA analysis, which is kind of the growing thing, is to look at size classes and how this distribution might be changing in time under different environmental effects. And so this gives us, let's say, size distribution by diameters, but also gives you the percent coverage, which the DAR NOAA approach does not. So you come up with more data, and I think very reliable data. And while I'm doing that, Melanie will go, Louise, who's specializing in the algae, will follow me along using a smaller quadrat. My Papa Bear quadrat is 0.66 meters square. Hers is 1/6 of a meter square. And she will take photographs along the same transect and then analyze these with CPC using point intercept analysis. A total of 55 points per quadrat, or 2,750 per transect for 25 quadrats. And from this, we get the percent covered by species or by major categories. At the same time, the DAR person and Melanie Hutchinson is doing the conventional DAR approach using fish transecting techniques on 3 25-meter long transects on a 4-meter wide path for the fish, and the inverts 1 meter wide path, which Melanie just records the macro inverts that she can identify on site, and takes the 10-centimeter depth coral for the later analysis in the laboratory. Well, these are the sites that we've been to. Again, this does not show up very well in this bright light, but this is Popopo and Pu'upe off the south coast of the Lanai. You can see the transect location starts and ends, and the reconnaissance locations starts and ends, and also some interesting points in the area, such as cathedrals, which we took a look at near Pu'upe, and a pinnacle near Popopo, or at Popopo. And then on Maui, Kaimi Island and Hulu Island, both of them off the north shore, are what's generally very highly exposed, highly turbulent circumstances. But we were real lucky with the weather and getting in May. We got perfect conditions in the Molokini Rim, which is probably the only one of these sites which has been visited very much at all. But generally, most Molokini divers are in the crater rather than on the rim, so this is relatively new and complete information. Well, this gives you an idea of what we get for Po'opo'o and Pu'upe. And you can see quite a difference, certainly starting with the number of species and the size class of those species, a lot more species of Pu'upe, generally larger. And also, I'm sure that you can't see this, but what's interesting to me is these two areas are, although it doesn't really reflect too well on this map, they're both very similar because the islands are actually here and here. And they're both in the lee of these islands, roughly the same direction, the transects, but quite different than what you've come up with. This dim figure would show you just a few corals in a highly sedimented bottom, whereas this is a more typical reef environment with a higher concentration of corals. Number of colonies per mean number of colonies for both were 10, with the average coverage of only about 1.5% versus twice that number of colonies at Pu'upe, and nearly 20 times as much in terms of total coverage. So two areas under what to me seemed almost an identical environmental circumstances coming up with quite different results. This is reflected also on these two islands off of North Maui, Kapakaini and Hulu. Hulu had a higher coral coverage. They're both highly exposed, a lot of big boulder environment there mostly. But Kaini was very highly covered with algae, particularly Dictyopteris, and whereas Hulu was a much more coral environment, coral-dominated environment. And of course, Molokini, very highly dominated coral environment with coverage up to nearly, what is at like 35% average. Well, when you look at the coral coverage for each of three of these, for Kaimi it was only about 1.2%, whereas it was 3 times that for Hulu. It seems to be much more different when you look at the photos. And of course, about 10 times that coverage for Maui. So that's oh yeah, also the other big contrast, of course, is the algal coverage. In Kaimi, the algae was running about 21%, and only about 3% at Hulu, and vanishing small, like teeny rhythm as you might expect. So that's just a brief summary of the quantitative data. This is the number of taxa that we've come up with for the species list for each. Roughly comparable totals of around 140 to 180, but different distributions among algae, invertebrates, and fishes. Fish is pretty much standard, but the invertebrates tend to change quite different from site to site. So that's briefly what we found so far. There's a lot more information for you in January. Our participants, when I started this project, I had a lot of worries about it because we had to do it with interns because it's a matching grant from another source which specified interns would be trained. But I've been really fortunate having 2 really great young women working with me. Melanie Hutchinson, who's just starting her her graduate program at UH, and Louise Giuseppe, who's finishing her undergraduate. And both of them have heavy class schedules, so they couldn't be here today. They would like to. But it's been a real pleasure working with them, and they have been very trainable because they pretty much trained themselves. DLNR has been very helpful in providing us both logistical support and people to do the fish transecting Paul Marikawa. Dave Yalko was instrumental in getting the project proposal written, but wasn't able to participate. So Paul Marikawa has taken over for him as being the coordinator and also doing much of the fish transecting for Oahu. On Maui, we've got a great deal of support from people who weren't really consulted very much about getting into this, but they've been really helpful. Chrissy Ron, Skippy Howe in the field, and Dr. Sparks and John Mitchell providing logistics support. And on Kalapapa, I don't see how we would have done this without the help of Eric Brown, who's offered to be part of it. He, again, was not consulted in the proposal process, but very generously stepped up and offered all facilities in the Kalapapa boat support, and also be doing the fish work for us there. Acknowledgements to HCRI and NOAA for funding, and Dan Walhemus for his support in providing the DAR, DLNR interest and enthusiasm, Dave Pence for diving safety program and EAU's coverage. And if there are any questions, either I or Big Boy or the Colonel will be happy to try to answer.